so little time to do it, and yes, I am sunburned. It is a funky tan line because of the way I was sitting, but I needed to finish this book, and I paid the price. Yes, it's on my legs too, but we're not gonna go there. Anyways, last book in the Lioness Quartet. This one is Lioness Rampant by Tamora. It could be because I was sitting out in the sun. It could be because I don't get enough sleep. It could be because the book got a little bit boring, but I started to fall asleep. The strongest part of this book was the end, or really any time there was action. I think what dragged this book down was there was too much going on for such a small book, which this was actually a little bit larger than the others, but I thought that Pierce was trying to tackle too much in too short of time and couldn't do it all justice. So there's really nothing I would take out in terms of story. Sorry, I just couldn't do it. She couldn't focus enough on her characters or on her plots and subplots to keep me engaged. For one, Liam Ironarm, who is Alanna's new love interest. I don't remember disliking him so much, and it's not that I disliked him. I just thought he wasn't worthy of being a love interest for her. I would love it if I could actually find this reviewer so I could tag her or like include a link to her page, which I might still do if I have time, which I don't because I'm going on a trip and I'm trying to get so much done before my trip, and I just we'll see. What I really wanted, because I'm complaining about these books, I have no idea what POV they're written in. I think there's supposed to be third POV close, which is it is seen from outside of Alanna, but we are really close to Alanna, so it's like Alanna is telling the story, but very often Pierce will head hop. So if you don't know much about writing, acceptable head hopping would be we're with Alanna. And this is still applicable to third person close because you don't have to stay with one character in order to do this. But okay, so we're with Alanna. We see whatever we need to see from her perspective. And then we have a clear distinction, a clear separation from Alanna and, say, Prince Jonathan. So now we are with Jonathan, seeing what Jonathan sees, hearing, or not hearing, but knowing what Jonathan is thinking. And then, okay, maybe we then skip over to George. But there's a delineation between each character in this book. And that is why I was like, is this supposed to be omniscient narration? We will start in Alanna's eyes, seeing somebody else approach. And then in the next paragraph, in the next sentence, we are in that character's head, which is not okay. It is incredibly confusing, and it prevents the reader from connecting with any single character because we don't have enough time with those characters to care about them. The thing with Alanna is that we get to Liam Ironarm and oh, sorry. I forgot where I'm going. I wasn't going there. It was related. But this book reviewer, because I was just like, okay, what perspective are we in? And this is where I was. I stumbled across hers. It really wasn't helpful in that respect. But she was just like, so I've never been a high fantasy reader. And then she'd had the opportunity to read these books, but she was so put off by this, the map of the world. It was so overwhelming for her at the very beginning that she was like, no thank you. 6-10 years later, she finally picks up the books and she's like, I think I missed something. Like, I think my younger self missed out by not reading these books. But she was like, and she was ranking Alanna's lovers, and her lovers, Jonathan, I was going to call him Gregory, and I was going to call him Jeffrey. Neither one of those right. Jonathan, George, and Liam. She commented on how Liam, basically Alanna describes him as like incredibly unattractive, yet she's attracted to him. I was like, huh, okay, slightly different than what I remember, but okay, let's roll with this. But that's basically what she does, is she's like, so he's got a severely pockmarked face, a massive mustache, and he's like huge. But I like him. We get that Liam is afraid of magic, so right off the bat, we're like, this isn't gonna work. We understand that he is the Shang dragon, which means he's like the top of the top in terms of warriors of this Shang class, and that he kind of came from nothing. We get nothing else about him. But almost right off the bat, they start hanky-panking. He agrees to join her on her quest, yet I'm supposed to care that they have struggles in their relationship. I don't know anything about this guy. And the fact that he makes her feel guilty about her magic, it could have been good. But because there was not enough time spent with them, it wasn't good. And so I was highly disappointed by this novel in terms of connectivity and development of characters and situations. But let me just give you the summary, because we know it might take me a long time to get back to that. Alanna, we pick up with her having returned to the Badger and having given their chief the mysterious letter from his sorceress friend. But apparently he was like, this has nothing to do with me, you take it. And that was my first point of contention. I was like, what? Why was it so important that Alanna go and rescue this woman, for this woman to give Alanna this note, for him to be like, it has nothing to do with me? Anyways, so what it is talking about this object called the Dominion Jewel, and how I think it's basically like where to find it. And the Dominion Jewel is supposed to bring luck and prosperity and all sorts of good things to whatever land it resides in. We get a little bit of folklore about past owners of this jewel. Then this kind of relates to something later on in the novel where this one woman, she steals it. Somehow she falls into a river. She's rescued by this guy. And then they end up kind of settling down in this one terrain, this one land. And we get this history lesson about this war occurring in this land. Somehow the Dominion Jewel disappears at some point, and she ends up having to go to this land called the Roof of the World, which I was like, can we please explore the Roof of the World more? There were certain things that Pierce touches on here that I was like, whoa, there's so much story here, because you are setting up so much world building, the genesis of the Badger and how the Badger are related to these other tribes, the Roof of the World, just other territories and terrains and places in Tortal that I was just like, I want more. Anyways, she kind of explains it because Alanna goes and she battles this elemental who apparently had created it, and she explains it off as this jewel just somehow makes its way back to this elemental, and he kind of like hangs out with it for a while until somebody else tries to come and get it. But how? Except that it put Alanna in a very uncomfortable situation, and it was something that she had to fight her way out of, which is fine. I really don't mind that it was a difficult situation for her. It was uncomfortable for her. She had to test her own limits. It tested her relationship with others in order to find this jewel. Like, I didn't mind. That's a really good story. But I thought the dots were not connected clearly enough for my liking. The book opens with her and Coram arriving in this city because they need this guy to translate the map. While they're there, they meet Liam, who is the Shang dragon. This is something that Pierce slightly touched on in the previous book, where there had been another Shang warrior in chorus when Alanna went to visit George, and George, like, as soon as she expressed interest in meeting this Shang warrior, George, it intimates that he had this warrior like sent away, where I was like, what? Why? It did not make much sense whatsoever. This is something that I'm like, okay, I can see how all 4 of these books were supposed to be one book, because there are these little details that do connect them. It is erroneous for the woman who rides like a man, but it opens up a door for Lioness Rampant. She's like, yes, Shang warrior, teach me your ways. She and Coram, her manservant, are actually on their way out of town when they get attacked by some highwaymen, some robbers, some whoever, that are sent by Claw. Claw is George's foe from the woman who rides like a man, who we still don't know who he is, although spoiler, it turns out he is Rallin of Melvin, and I don't think I mentioned him from the Alanna review, but he was Alanna's tormentor when she was young in that first book. They had it out, she beat him, he left. So it turns out that he's just not a good dude. He tried to do something he shouldn't have done. He had acid thrown in his face, he lost an eye, he was scarred, and then he was like, a pirate's life for me. We're not gonna get into him though. I guess Claw, or Rallin, knows that you get rid of the Lioness, that'll hurt George. In any case, we get rid of the Lioness, it solves a lot of problems. They are almost defeated, but then Liam shows up, he helps them out, and then he's like, yeah, I'll come with you in your quest to find this Dominion jewel. Along the way, as I mentioned, there is, like, this is war-torn terrain. They are in Sarain, and this was something I did not quite understand, but we are given the history lesson. There's a warlord who hates a certain people group, the Khmer, but then he marries one of them, and she's like the most beautiful woman there is. I didn't understand what was going on here. Like, it didn't make sense to me, this explanation as to why he would go and marry this woman. I could understand that he wanted to control her, that he wanted to do bad things to her, that he wanted to show her that he was in charge and there's nothing she could do about it. But we don't know why he decided to marry somebody that he basically hated. They have a daughter named Thayet, and this was a little convoluted for me, like, why all these people were at war. But in any case, Thayet, at some point, her mother, Callison, because he is oppressing her people, she's like, the only way to make my point, to get my point across, is to, you know what I'm saying? After this, Thayet, she's like, I'm getting out of here. But she's also a pawn, so like the guy that he is warring with both wants to kill her and to marry her. So she and her guardswoman Burry, she is like, yep, we're gonna go out of here. And Liam, Coram, and Alanna are on the road. Faithful, her cat, comes up and is like, oh my gosh, there's this group. So she and Liam go to check it out, only for Burry to like creep up behind them and kind of take them hostage. And then when they get back to their camp, they find that Thayet has basically gotten Coram at like a sword's point. So if this traveling party was X distance away, how did they get in your backyard in the time it took you to try to find them? It didn't make sense to me. But that's one of those things that I think Pierce struggled with in this early writing. It wasn't as finessed as it turns out to be with the Becca Cooper series. At this point, so this was something huge. One, not so huge. There were some grammar and spelling mistakes in here that were obviously things that were missed by the publisher, by the copy editors. But this was the thing that got me. Everybody knows who Liam Ironarm is. Everybody knows about the Shang Dragon. In certain areas, Alanna is also a legend, also very well known because she is a woman who posed as a boy and earned a knight's shield. But when she and her friends are captured Burry is like, we don't need to trust them. And Thea is like, well, I know nothing about her, but I definitely know about Liam Ironarm. So yeah, let's ally ourselves. But at the end of the novel, she and Alanna were having a conversation about kind of women's rights and women's place within society. And Faye's like, in my society, this is how women were viewed, but we even heard about you. And I was like, I'm pretty sure you said you'd never heard of her. So why is it that she was a legend even within your own court? Anyways, they go to the closest city. I mean, there's other people in Burry and Fayette's party. They make it to the closest city almost for them to instantly be attacked. Burry and Alanna chase after the dude who ends up dying, but they come to the conclusion that someone is trying to kill Fayette. They have sent her and the others along to this convent. It's supposed to be somewhere you can seek refuge. They get there, but nobody has let Fayette and the party in. Alanna is like, hey, you, take this message to the people in charge. And they're let in only to be told that Fayette's dad had died. Therefore, it's too dangerous for them to house her because there's like a bounty on her head. They're like, well, we'll take these kids, but you guys, you cannot stay here. Like, we're already in enough trouble. Like, people already know that you've come to us. Alanna's like, hey, if you guys want to come with us, feel free. So they do. They travel to the roof of the world, at which point it's like one of Lana's greatest dislikes / fears is the cold. She really cannot stand the cold. And I was a little thrown off by the timeline here. I couldn't tell what time of year it was. Maybe it's because I was falling asleep. I don't really know. All of this was relatively boring. I didn't mind when they ran across Fayette. I didn't care for anything involving Liam. But I was like, this is a lot of backstory and filler, and I just wasn't into it. They get to the roof of the world, and the innkeeper is like, you can't go up that path. It is the worst time of year. They're all settling in. They're like, okay, we're gonna wait out the worst of it. And then Alanna's group meets members of this other tribe, and they have a scene woman. She tells Alanna, or some entity speaks through this scene woman, and she tells Alanna, like, it doesn't matter what time of year it is. Like, you can wait all you want. That weather is always going to be bad. Now, Liam, who has this irrational, in my opinion, because we know nothing about him, this irrational fear of magic, and he's getting all caveman on her, and she's like, who are you to tell me what to do? Anyways, she ends up one night deciding, hey, it's time for me to go. I need to go get this jewel. Her cat, who we don't necessarily learn in this book, it is intimated that he is the constellation, the cat, but it is for certain in the Becca Cooper series that he is actually a constellation that can take the form of a cat. So he has magic, and he keeps Liam asleep, which naturally does not bode well for when Alanna comes back down the mountain, if she comes back. She bundles up and she gets up that hill. She encounters the elemental that created and sort of guards the Dominion Jewel. It takes the shape of an ape, and then they battle it out. She is like depleted of her magic, which again, I don't understand her relationship with her magic. I understand that she's afraid of her magic. I understand that of herself and her brother Tom. He is the stronger of the two. But you're also given the impression that she's incredibly strong with her magic and that she is incredibly gifted. But then there are things that she's like, oh, I don't think I can handle that. But then she handles something else. And I'm like, I do not compute. She ends up getting the jewel because there's a point where she has her sword knocked away. She manages to disarm the ape using some of the maneuvers that Liam has taught her. Picks up his sword, which obviously it's infused with some kind of magic, which is why it affects her so much. But all we get is that she picks up this sword and it is basically the hardest thing for her to hold ever. And I was like, I mean, is it burning you? Like, what do you mean by this reaction? I guess in some ways the elemental has the upper hand, even though it looks like she has the upper hand because she has the weapon. She basically says, okay, I give up. Keep the jewel. I don't want it. And I guess this selflessness is what makes him say, yeah, actually, yeah, you can have it. He praises her for her bravery and her skill. And this is one thing I've noticed, is that Pierce will get her, particularly Alanna, not so much in the Becca Cooper series, not so much in the Immortals series, but she will get Alanna into deep doo-doo that she has to work very hard to get through and overcome. But it's that moment of ultimate decision and fight where there is no fight. It's really easy for Alanna then to achieve her goal, which we will see in the end of this novel. She passes out, she wakes up a week later, and Liam is pissed at her because of what her cat did. And I just would have been like, it was my cat. I had no control over him. Like, he decided to stay. How was I mean, she's dead lying, but like, how am I supposed to know what he did in my absence? And this is the end of their relationship. He realizes she's never gonna stop using magic. She realizes he's never gonna come to terms with it, and I don't want a caveman. I don't want him ordering me around, which I was like, yes, Alanna. So why were you involved with him in the first place? Like, she made multiple comments about how this is not gonna be the guy for her. So I was like, was it just physical at this point? Like, you just needed a physical connection to somebody? She has this feeling, she's like, I need to get home. They encounter one of her old friends from the palace. He brings them home, and we learn that both Jonathan's parents have died. His mother died seemingly of natural causes, but more than likely related to the fact that she had been harmed by Duke Roger earlier in her life, where he had caused the sweating sickness, and then he had created that doll in her likeness and put it under running water. So he had affected her health, and she ends up dying. And then not long after, the king seemingly had a horse riding accident, but Jonathan is like, he killed himself. And I was like, okay, that could have used a little bit more. So now Jonathan is king, or he is to be king, but people are having a hard time accepting him because they feel like bad omens. Okay, his reign did not start off well. And here's another spoiler, something that I've hinted at in other books. Tom has raised Roger from the dead. He was goaded by Delia, who was once Jonathan's lover. All of these things, people are just not loving John for president. Here's something else. I knew that Jonathan and Fayette were going to get together because I've read the other books, because I've read this one 18 million times. But I disliked a couple things along these lines. The first thing, and the most directly related thing, is how Alanna, like, once she meets Fayette, she's automatically like, I'm gonna play matchmaker. This feels very uncharacteristic for Alanna. She has gotten a little bit more feminine in certain ways, like not just physically, but accepting her femininity. The way that she and Jonathan left things, even though she knew she did not want to marry him, she did not want to be his queen, I thought it was very out of place for her to be like, okay, well now I'm going to find him a queen. It's not like, let me find him a queen so I don't have to be queen. It's kind of like, oh my gosh, like I know someone who'd be perfect for you. It just, further down that line, Pierce loves a happily ever after. Spoiler, George and Alanna get together. George's mother and Alanna's foster or adoptive father, Miles, get together. Coram and George's cousin Rispa end up getting together, which they had been established in the last book, and I don't think we're that out of place, but I was like, holy macaroni. How many more couples can we create in this world? It's only, I think it bothers me because there is very little groundwork set for this kind of stuff, except for Coram and Rispa. But all of a sudden, George, he's in danger. His mother is in danger from Claw. Claw has no allegiance to anybody. He will stab his own mother in the back. George, in order to protect his mother, takes her to stay with Miles. And it's like the moment they set eyes on each other. And it's just so cheesy. And considering Pierce is not a cheesy writer. Her characters are not cheesy characters. Alanna is not some simpering female who can't take care of herself. So I was like, why do we have all of these hearts in our eyes moments when people first lay eyes on each other? At the same time, George is like, am I sensing something? And then later in the novel, when Alanna arrives and she's like, George, did you do this? He's like, yeah, I'm a matchmaker. I'm like, but that is not what you were set up as when this first happened. That was not your goal. Your goal was to protect your mother. And the fact that she ended up being attracted to Miles was not your intention. Alanna makes it back to Tortal, or to Chorus, and Jonathan ends up asking her to be his champion, the king's champion. They are preparing for his coronation. And we start basically from the moment that Alanna meets up with her old friend. Sorry, I'm so itchy. I think it's sun poisoning. Basically from the point that Alanna decides to return to Chorus, we are in every other character's head, which we need for the end of the book, because there are certain things that Alanna cannot see, cannot witness, but are important, are helpful, are engaging for the story. This is when all my ranting and raving about how many other characters' heads we get into leaves me without a leg to stand on, because we ultimately do need to have established being with these characters at certain points. I think overall, Pierce could have done a better job at how she went about it. But at this point in time, I started getting bored again, because it was obviously leading somewhere. And in the end, it was all necessary. I'm not arguing any of that. But because there was a lack of time and a lack of development, it felt very one note. It's like, oh, gotta check this one off, gotta check this one off, gotta check this one off. So at the end, A leads to Z. It was problematic for me. But we learn that Roger has supposedly been brought back from the dead without his magic. But something is very wrong with Tom. Alanna recognizes right away that he's dying. Spoiler, this was never, ever, ever, ever explained. So I still don't understand it. I will never understand how this happened. But it turns out that, yes, Roger didn't have his magic, but he does have his magic, and he is bound to Tom, so he is bound to whoever raised him. Now Tom's magic is tainted, and it's killing him, and somehow it's making Roger stronger. Throughout this novel, Roger's a changed man, and everybody trusts him, but then they don't trust him, and so it's like Jonathan has restored all of his titles, and he allows him within close quarters of him. He's given him full pardons, and I'm just like, I get it. We're trying to set up John's character, but he legit tried to kill you. He tried to kill your parents. He tried to kill all of your friends. You think just because you raised him from the dead, he's changed? There is a plot to kill John, and it turns out it's not Duke Roger, but it is his inner circle, and he gets very angry, and this also does bring Claw back into the picture. but he's very angry with them for trying to do this because now all eyes are on him. But it includes Delia, it includes Princess Josiane, who is the woman who John's mother had kind of planned as his rebound and, you know, set up to be his queen. And he very quickly apparently realized she's not queen material. There is Alex of Tiragan, who is Alanna's like frenemy, who in this book we finally come to a head with him, but I have no idea what his motivation is, except for the fact that he had been in Duke Roger's service. So it's possible that at some point in all this time that he serves Duke Roger, that Roger was able to poison him against Alanna, and this is why he dislikes her. We never, ever, ever, ever know. And there's even a point when Roger approaches this little band of conspirators, everybody's like, well, what is Alex's motivation? What does he want to get out of this? Because then both he and Roger are like, oh, well, we both know that he wasn't part of this and he has something else up his sleeve or in his sight line. We never know what that is, except for the fact that he wants to kill Alanna. But what he wants to get out of that, I don't know. It's never explained. We do learn that Roger is up to no good and he does have a plan. We don't know what the plan is, but there's something a brewing. George confronts Tom because there's something wrong with Tom. He sends for one of Tom's old teachers who's like, I have an idea as to how to make you better. They take some of his magic, which as I said, has intermingled with Duke Roger's, and they put it in Alanna. However, they advise her not to even use her magic because there's something dangerous about putting extra magic in a person. Like they're only built to carry so much magic. It doesn't make sense because later on in the novel, they take her magic and somebody else's magic and they give it to John. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm pretty sure you just told Alanna not to use her magic. They're like, it's not going to be long. This takes 1 week, 2 weeks max, and then, you know, everything will be okay. Well, obviously everything's not okay because we have John's coronation comes and Duke Roger has snuck in the men at arms from Alex's fief, and then the men that serve, I think it's Delia, and they snuck them into the coronation. Duke Roger creates this spell. It has some effect on the earth. Somehow the earth is supposed to like break down the palace and kill everybody. I don't really know what this disruption of the earth is supposed to do except cause disruption. Because of Tom's magic being partially put into Alanna, he did not have full access to Tom's magic, which meant he did not have full access to the powers that he needed in order to create the full force of this spell. He does somehow, and this doesn't make sense to me, he somehow is able to cut off the master's hand, and somehow this gives him access to magic of some sort. So they're in like the belly of the belly of the belly of this castle. Alanna, after everything starts, goes to find Tom, only to realize that she has the Dominion Jewel and she needs to get it back to John. George shows up. She gives it to him to take to John, and that's his own story to get back to John. She stumbles across Tom, who is dying. He kind of gives her the lowdown about what's happening. Sai Cham, the master, shows up and he's like, oh, we've made this grave error. If I had made 2 grave errors, then we'd all be dead, but I'm just gonna implant all this information into your head. My question is, if Duke Roger, because it's implied that he cut off Sai Cham's hand in the belly of the belly of the belly of the castle, how did he get all the way up to the top? Saicham's method of imparting this information knocks Alanna out. When she comes to Josiane, who is apparently crazy as all get out, and like there's inbreeding in the Copper Isles. Every generation there is a cuckoo person, and we've gotten the idea that, yeah, like something's wrong with her, but like, whoa, she really flipped that switch. She kills Saicham, Alanna kills her. She then goes down to the belly of the castle. And we see all of this because Jonathan can see all of this because he has gotten the Dominion Jewel and now he is tied to the land. He has all this extra power. Alanna, going down to get Roger, runs into Alex, who reveals that, yes, he's here to kill her. He told her that they would duel eventually, and here they are. She ends up killing him. He disarms her, but then she kills him using the moves that Liam taught her. She then gets to the bowels of the castle where she meets Duke Roger. He points out the fact that part of her sword is of his making. He is calling the sword to him. And this is what I'm talking about, where it takes everything she has to get to that penultimate moment, only for that penultimate moment to be resolved incredibly easy. She's just like, what if I just let go? So she lets go. It spears him and he dies. He like disintegrates. On one hand, I think it's kind of ingenious because she didn't have to do anything and we're all thinking she will. And on this note, there were moments in this entire series because she kills him in the second book. From then on, she suffers immense guilt over it. There are moments where I'm like, dude, just get over it. Like, he was a bad guy. You knew he was a bad guy. He had to die, and you killed him. You didn't mean to kill him. You wouldn't have killed him if you could have helped it, but you couldn't help it. So, like, get over it. But I get it. She was like 18, which on that note, can I say how old she feels here? I think she's only 20 or 21, and she feels like she's in her 30s or her 40s. And I was just like, what? That's neither here nor there nor anywhere. George kills Claw. Alanna kills the Duke. Jonathan becomes king. And Alana's like, you know what? I gotta get out of the Dodge. And there's also this moment where there's a certain season and a certain night during the season where people like hook up. You know, they get together, they declare their love for each other, whatever. Like, that's the whole intent. And she, who has never wanted to get married, never wanted to have kids, is like, I'm going to be an old maid forever. And Faithful's like, I thought that's what you wanted. In any case, she's kind of sulking because George isn't pursuing her. He's just treating her like a friend. So now we are in the desert with her and we encounter Liam dies. And he knew he died. Like, this is one of those things, again, it's kind of foreshadowing, where when they met that fortune teller at the inn, he was like, well, I've already had my fortune told, but, you know, you can tell me what you see, but don't let anybody else know. So we have the impression something's going to happen, and he does. He takes some arrows for John, but his one of his teachers finds Alanna, and she's like, here's a letter that he wrote for you and sent to me, and I'm supposed to give it to you if he died. And he basically tells her, look, I know you blame yourself, because that's her biggest flaw, is she blames herself for everything. And he's like, but I knew my time was coming. No Shang dragon has ever lived as long as I have, so that's a win. Keep it up and keep going. She's like, I want to go home. I want to see George, but I'm not going to go see him until I finish knitting this like sweater or blanket or something. And what would you know? A shadow darkens her doorway, and it's George. And they declare their love for each other. He had earlier in the novel been pardoned by John because he was the king of the rogue. The whole thing with Claw had disillusioned him. He didn't like the way that the rogue was going. So he was like, I think I'm done. John pardons him and also gives him a barony because he wants him to be his spy master. And in order for him to be at court events, he has to hold a title. Initially, George is insulted, and then he's like, oh, okay, fine, I'll do it. He shows up, and they decide, we're gonna stick it out together for the rest of our lives, which I'm totally Team George, because I've said I didn't understand John. Liam was pointless. George makes sense. And there we go. That's it. We are done with the Song of the Lioness. Yeah, I'd love for you to check it out. Oh, her sword, Lightning, she ends up losing it because it embeds itself into the wall when it struck Duke Roger. So she's just like, yeah, let's leave it. And that was actually heartbreaking for me because this sword meant so much to her. But on the same token, I thought there was so much history to this sword that we never learned, but you knew was there. So I again, there's just little things that were missing that kind of added up to big things in terms of world building, and there's not much that Pierce could do with the lengths of these books. But I would love to know how she feels in retrospect. We're done, and I have things to do. So I hope you enjoyed this. Like, subscribe, comment, do all that kind of fun stuff, and let me know what other, I guess if you want to call this high fantasy, I don't really know. It's fantasy, and I've realized that I do like fantasy. So if you have any other recommendations, let me know. Bye.